Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're going to allow some people to trail in. Hi everybody. I am so glad to be here with you today. I am Kayla Jones and I work with Psych Services, and we're just gonna give it another minute, let people trail in. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. If you had any issues getting the handouts and the email that was sent out, feel free to drop that in there too, and we will make sure that you get everything that you need today. So I'm going to get started and just kind of introduce myself a little bit. I have 7 years experience as a school psychologist in Texas, New Hampshire, and California, so all over. And I've worked with children of all ages in my professional life over the past decade, and I've worn many hats as a school psychologist. So providing crisis support and response, special education program and consultation and support, counseling, functional behavioral assessments, the works, psychoeducational assessments. And I've worked with Psych Services since January of 2019, and I live in the greater Boston area. So I know that we have a lot of California people here today, but I'm in the greater Boston area, and I live here with my husband and my 2 kids and my cat. And so I have a 4.5-year-old girl and a very newly 2-year-old boy. So we are busy. There we go. Okay, so today's webinar is sponsored by Psych Services, and we are a team of learning and behavior experts who are passionate about supporting you. We see so many parents and caregivers struggling to do too much with too little. And when your child is struggling, it's really hard to know where to turn. Anxiety is always a hot topic, right? And I think it is because anxiety is so innate to how we function as humans. And I think it's especially relevant today, given our current global and national experiences. We don't want you to feel like you're alone in your journey to help your kids. We're here to help lighten that load by giving helpful tips and tools in these webinars. And we also, Psych Services provides high quality services and resources beyond just today. We provide pocket coaching, educational consultation, and of course, assessments. So a little housekeeping for today. Like I said a few minutes ago, please feel free to use the chat box if any questions come up, whether it's a technology issue, a comment, a question about the material. There will be an opportunity to address questions at a specific point in the presentation. But if one is relevant to what we're discussing, feel free to drop it in there and we'll see if we have time to address it. And today I'm going to ask you to participate in some polls, some word shares at different points in the presentation. And this will happen through text or clicking on pop-ups that come up on your screen. And each time you share this way, it will be anonymous. And if you would like to ask questions anonymously, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can send a private chat to our moderator, Amy. Hello, Amy. And no identifiable information will be shared with the group. And just want to let y'all know that this webinar is live streaming to some of our social media pages, and we're also recording it to share with others who were not able to be here today. So hopefully people got the handouts that were sent in email this morning. If you didn't, we can help you out and we can put them, I believe, in the chat box. So if anybody needs those, feel free to reach out. Okay, yep, looks like a couple people might need those. And you'll also get a copy of all the handouts afterwards. And we are going to have some time of self-reflection and for writing down if you had a chance to print things out. But if you have a piece of paper and a pen, that'll be just fine too, because I will be going over the questions with you. So with webinars, I can't see you, you can see me. So it's difficult to gauge how people are doing or how much more or less time that they need during the reflection time. So I may ask you at certain points to use the raise a hand feature when you're done at certain points so we know when to move on and keep things flowing, okay? So feel free to go ahead and drop a comment in the chat box about who you are. Are you a parent, a guardian, an educator, a mental health professional, a combination of all those things? We'd love to know who we have here today. Okay. So today's training is not meant to be a substitution for therapy, right? Today's training is meant to help you spot small and big anxieties in yourself and your children. Also examine your own responses and develop language and tools for talking with your child about their worries. It's about breaking the patterns early to manage the day-to-day anxieties. And if you have or suspect that you or your child has an anxiety disorder, professional treatment is what is recommended. Today, you're not going to be hearing about ways to address fears of the dark or public speaking or separating from parents or heights, etc., because what your child is worrying about is not what's actually the most important part. The most important part is addressing the feeling of anxiety and the effect of anxiety themselves. So I see in the chat box, we've got lots of different people here. We've got parents, school psychologists, all kinds of people. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here. All right, so more about where we're going today. We're going to look at our role as parents and mental health. We're going to look at anxiety, what anxiety looks like and feels like. You're also going to have a time of reflection on your own feelings, behaviors, and patterns, looking at what your goals are for your own family. How often do we have time to just sit and think and reflect when we're not on the fly? We're also going to be talking about what we do as parents to enhance anxiety, even with all the love and the care that we have for our children. And we're going to talk about breaking the patterns of anxiety. How do we take away anxiety stronghold? And then how do we get our children on board to use these tools at home? And then obviously those next steps, like I mentioned, when to collaborate with the school and outside providers. Okay, so courage is not the absence of fear, but doing something in spite of fear. I really wish I knew who said that because I think that it's a great quote. And if you have the handout, if you were able to get the handout in front of you, I've also included a printout picture with the quote on there because I think words are powerful, and surrounding ourselves with powerful messages will just help us to internalize those messages. So go ahead and put it in your kid's room, put it next to the bathroom mirror, put it on your the inside of your pantry when you go to reach for a snack. It's there to remind you that courage is not the absence of fear, but doing something in spite of fear. So I would love to tell you, well, this is my very first webinar. And so I would love to tell you that leading up to today, I've just been 100% calm, cool, collected, confident, using all my tools at all times, but that just wouldn't be honest. But I'm here, I worked through them, I showed up, and we can help our children show up too. So let's take a look at the statistics on the slide. 18% of the general population over 18 has an anxiety disorder. That's a lot. That's almost a quarter of the population. And then the second one, 7.1% of children ages 3, little babies, to 17 experience anxiety versus 3.2% have depression. So that is it's a lot more instances of anxiety in children than depression. So it's more common than we think. And then also anxiety disorders are highly treatable, yet only 37% of those suffering receive treatment. That's not a big percentage. And we're going to talk about how helpful treatment can be. So Dr. Golda Ginsberg is a psychologist and professor at the University of Health, Connecticut. And her colleagues tested a family-based model aimed at preventing the onset of anxiety in children of anxious parents. They recruited 136 families with children aged 6 to 13, and at least one parent from each family had an anxiety disorder. So this is something that was diagnosed by a mental health professional. Anxiety disorders are different from feelings of anxiousness or worry, right? We all deal with feelings of stress, anxiety, worry, but we're talking about when it kind of steps into the disorder level. So one of the parents in these groups had a diagnosed anxiety disorder. Half of these families participated in a family-based 8-week program that taught techniques to identify and reduce anxiety, as well as parenting and problem-solving strategies. This program was not just about the child, right? It wasn't just about fixing the child and their problems. This was family-centered and including the parent's role in that. It addressed the entire family, including the identified parent with the anxiety disorder. The control group, the other half, they just received pamphlets with information about anxiety disorders. This is like the equivalent of reading another blog on parenting.com or another mommy or daddy blog post about parenting and anxiety. Just another way to consume information. So let's see the differences and how that played out. So 1 year later, only 5% of children in the intervention group had developed an anxiety disorder compared with the 30% of children in the control group. So it's kind of that age-old question of nature versus nurture. So what we know about anxiety is that it's kind of a mixture of both, right? And remember that 30% that went on to develop, their children went on to develop the anxiety disorders that their parent already had established in the home. It was just taking in information. Let's see, we have a question that came in. A question from a parent that I'll share out. Do you see that higher achieving students are having a more difficult time emotionally with distance learning? Well, that's a really great question and really relevant to the time that we're in right now. I am not having a lot of face-to-face time with students right now, so it's difficult for me to know. And I think that the people who are kind of on the front lines of that are the teachers. So if there are any teachers in here, if they want to kind of respond back to that question in the chat, if they're seeing kind of the impact of this anxiety in our children, with especially those higher achieving students. With distance learning. I will say that I think we're seeing a lot more acute onset anxiety in our children, given the current national and global situation with the pandemic. Acute meaning it came on rather quickly. It wasn't really a major issue before. I think that is pretty relevant to our current time. So let's keep going. And feel free to continue that conversation in the chat box. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to spot anxiety in ourselves. Some of us may be really good at this already, and some of us, some of this information might be new. So it's important to note that anxiety does not just mean panic attacks or never leaving your home, right? Those are kind of extreme examples. For some, anxiety can be completely internal. It's something that we never see on the outside of that person. Or we may just attribute it to a personality trait, right? Like, oh, that person's so high strung. They're an obsessive scheduler or a list maker, neat freak, or a chatty Cathy. So let's look at some of these symptoms here. Under physical, we have increased or irregular heart rate, your stomach in knots, difficulty catching breath, which can then be connected to that irregular heartbeat, right? Shaking, tightness in chest, tense in your shoulders, your jaw, your neck, headaches, dry mouth, fatigue, and then the mental impact and the emotional behavioral impact. So these are all different ways that we may see anxiety in ourselves. And so what we're going to do right now is we are going to do a quick poll. We're going to create a word cloud together. Okay, so how we're going to do this is, bear with me, computer's being a little bit slow. There we go. Okay, so what I want you to do is you can either go to that web address at the top, polev.com/KaylaJones086, or fun way, you can text all caps Kayla Jones 086 to the number 22333. Okay. And what we're going to do is, what I'd like you to do is everybody put in one word if you can, because if you do 2 words, they'll separate it out. So if you want to do 2 words, don't put a space in between. But put in the feelings and impact that you feel anxiety has in yourself, whether it's something that you already knew about or maybe a new thing that popped up on the screen.
Kayla, can you go back one slide so everyone can see how to text?
Yeah, if you look up at the top of the screen, can you see the polev.com blue screen there?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
If you look at the top bar up there, you can text all caps Kayla Jones 086 to the number 22333. I did it the opposite way. I was first trying to do it. So the phone number that you're texting to is 22333. Let's see, we haven't gotten anything yet. So these are feelings, ways that anxiety manifests in yourself physically, their mental impact, or emotional behaviorally in yourself. Okay, so we've got some words coming in. Mental stress. I think the mental stress is probably meant to be one word. Avoidance. Ooh, that's a good one. Irritability. Yes. Fatigue. Shortness of breath. Hotness. It's interesting how some of these are separated out. So the bigger the words, the more common the responses are. So I think a lot of people are feeling fatigue, stressed, and irritable. I think that those could be the theme words for the year of 2020. I think everyone can relate to that, especially now. Shortness of breath, temper, jittery, unsettled, exhausted. Yes. Okay, that's great. I mean, that's not great. But, okay. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So there may be, now we're going to talk about how to spot anxiety in our children. Okay, so this may be why everybody came today, right? Oh, I want to know about my children. I'm here to learn about how to help my children with anxiety. But as you can see, we're going to spend some time talking about ourselves. So this might be what more people were interested, why you're here today, is how to spot anxiety in our children. There are many similarities, overlapping of symptoms of anxiety, the mental impacts, and the emotional behavioral impacts. The difference between children and adults is that children do not often realize how intense their feelings are. If you've ever experienced these feelings of anxiety in yourself, the ones that were popping up there, imagine how much more frightening and confusing these symptoms are for a child in their small little bodies, especially when they don't have the executive functioning skills to yet understand or the words to label it. Or they don't have the ability to regulate themselves yet, right? Like we can control them, we can control ourselves much better as adults. They don't yet have the language to effectively tell us what it is that they need, what they're feeling, what the trigger was. So let's look at some of these symptoms together. Again, for children, we have that increased irregular heart rate, stomach aches. If you have a kid who's constantly complaining of those physical ailments and you know that they're not sick, oh, Mom, I have a stomach ache again. I have a headache. I can't go to school. Shaking, dizziness, fatigue. Then the mental impact. I think it's important to talk about these in our children specifically. The worrying about things before they happen, the constant what if questions. You know, it's totally normal to have those conversations of like, Mom, what would happen if we had a tornado? And then you kind of walk through your safety plans, and we have people to keep us safe. It's a different thing if you have a child who's asking these kind of constant what if, big scale questions about disasters frequently. That's when it kind of gets into over the load of just kind of typical worrying. That worst case scenario thinking, going straight to what's the worst thing that could possibly happen in this situation. If they have to get up in front of everybody, they're going to throw up. That's kind of like worst case scenario thinking. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, nightmares. Anxiety can affect children's memory and their problem solving skills. Anxiety might also look like a constant need for reassurance from their parents. So that constant checking in, how am I doing? Did I do this right? The need for everything to be perfect, right? Someone mentioned our high achieving students. I think that this definitely pertains to our higher achieving students with that need for everything to be perfect and that constant reassurance that they're good, that they've got it, that they're smart. Irritability, we had a lot of adults resonate with that. Avoidance of things or people that they enjoy. Procrastination, reluctance or refusal to go to school, clinginess, being shy, frequent crying or temper tantrums. Seeking out easy tasks, right? Not going for things that'll challenge them because they have too much anxiety to cope with the what ifs and the failures. And then withdrawal. And we talked about not having the language to kind of describe what they're going through. And a child can be verbally fluent, can be highly intelligent. But that does not mean that they have the language or the understanding to express what they're really feeling, what they're going through. Okay, so let's think back to when your child was a baby, and that may have been recently, that may have been a really long time ago. So think back to when they were a baby and you tried to leave them with the babysitter or drop them off at daycare. And those drop-off times went from easy breezy to a nightmare. Well, that's when anxiety first appears in humans. Around 7 or 8 months of age is stranger anxiety. I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with that. When an infant becomes distressed, that's kind of those first signs of anxiety coming out. So from preschool age to around age 8, a child's anxieties are focused on specific identifiable events, right? When they're younger than age 8, they're typically afraid of the dark, thunderstorms, or an event like the loud dog that barked at you on your evening walk. Now they're afraid of dogs because of that experience, right? With age, the sources of anxiety become more social and abstract, such as worrying about friends, social acceptance or the future, coping with a new move or something going on at school. Those more abstract things of like fear of disappointment, fear of rejection. Adolescents also tend to become more worried about sexual, religious, and moral issues as they continue to develop. But in the vast majority of cases, children and adolescents cope well with these situations. And severe chronic anxiety is not common, right? We saw that number, it was 7%. If your child does not grow out of these fears or they significantly interfere with their daily functioning, then we're talking about a possible anxiety disorder. If the fears cause them to avoid certain events or activities like they're not going to go to grandma and grandpa's anymore because they're so afraid of their dogs all of a sudden, or they're insistent on checking the weather every single day to watch for storms, or they're refusing to go to school or a previous friend's house to play, or only play inside, they're not going to go outdoors anymore. That's when we're talking about a little bit more extreme. So think back to those slides just a moment ago where we talked about how to spot anxiety. Some of those things are normal as our children grow and experience new things, but it can become problematic when we think about how often and how intense those symptoms are, that we may be thinking that this is a bigger problem than just, regular anxiety. So that's when we're talking about it's 1, excessive or typical for their age or developmental level. 2, it's inappropriate or excessive for the situation, or it's very frequent. Or 3, it's persisted for several weeks or months. And it's important to note that the timeline is often shorter for kids than it is for adults, because 3 months to a kid is a lot longer than like a 3-month blip to an adult. So those timelines are a little bit shorter. Okay, so we are going to watch a video, and this video is meant for children, but it's useful for adults as well. And any educators or mental health professionals that are in here today, you may already be very well acquainted with this video, but I think that it's continues to be relevant and important information. So we're going to watch it together.
Kids want to know. Imagine that you really want to play soccer at lunchtime, but when the bell rings, you can't find your shoes. When you finally get out to the field, the teams have been picked and it's too late for you to play. Maybe you got so mad that this small problem became a big problem in an instant.
Whoops.
When we lose control of our emotions like this, we can call it flipping your lid, kind of like the way a pot might do if it was too full and too hot. A little while later, after you've cooled down, you might even feel sad when you realize that when you had a big reaction to a little problem, you could have hurt someone's feelings. What if I told you that this happens to everyone? Your parents, friends, teachers, and everyone else you know can flip their lid and lose control of their emotions sometimes. We all need to work on managing our feelings. Have you ever wondered why we can have such a hard time keeping our emotions under control? It can be really tough being a kid these days. There's just so much going on every day, at home, at school, even after school. Sometimes it's hard to keep a lid on things, and we act in ways that are not kind or caring, even though we don't mean to be hurtful. There are so many situations that we encounter every day that can cause our emotions to bubble up. Maybe you felt upset or frustrated when you were working on a problem or activity at school and just can't seem to get it right. Maybe something unexpected or embarrassing happened to you in front of your friends. Maybe you had something important to say but didn't get a chance to say it. These and many, many more situations can cause both kids and adults to flip their lids. So why does this even happen? Well, it has to do with the way our amazing human brains work to help keep us safe. This is your brain, the part of your body that controls everything you do. Let's take a closer look at the parts of the brain and how they can work together to help us keep a lid on things. The brain is a pretty complicated organ, so we're going to use our hand to help us visualize what's happening up there. Let's imagine that our brain has an upstairs and a downstairs. Here, where our thumb is called the midbrain. This is where our emotions and memories are created and stored. Below that is your brainstem. The brainstem controls the things our bodies do that we don't have to think about, like breathing. It also controls our automatic reactions to certain situations. For example, if you touch a cup with hot tea in it and it's too hot, your downstairs brain feels the pain and will pull your hand away to stop you from getting burnt. It's an automatic reaction. You don't have to stop and think about what to do. Or imagine you're out on a hike and a bear wanders onto the path. Your brain doesn't stop and think, what kind of bear is it? Is it friendly? Your downstairs brain notices that you feel scared. It takes charge and in a split second decides whether or not you should fight, fly, another word for run away, or freeze. Because of the way our downstairs brain reacts to these situations, we can think of it as our emotional brain because it reacts instantly without needing to think things through. It's always ready to take charge in any situation to help keep you safe. So if this is our downstairs brain, then this part where the back of our hand and fingers are can be seen as our upstairs brain. It's called the cerebral cortex. This part of our brain helps us think logically, act with kindness, and think about how others might be feeling. It's also the problem-solving part of our brain. It helps us to think of possible solutions to a problem and decide which one is best. The upstairs brain is our thinking brain. Your upstairs and downstairs brain don't work alone. Your brain is set up so that the upstairs and downstairs brain can communicate with itself. It sends messages from section to section all the time about what our bodies feel and need. Let's take a closer look at our brain fist. Where our fingertips are is the logic and reasoning part of the brain that springs into action when we have a problem to solve, and usually it does a great job of doing it. But sometimes it can have a hard time solving a problem if the emotional brain and thinking brain can't communicate well enough. This can happen if your emotions get too overwhelming and your downstairs brain decides that this situation might be dangerous, even if it isn't really. And we all know what happens when our downstairs brain thinks you're in danger. It triggers our fight, flight, or freeze reflex. Our emotions start to bubble up and then suddenly everything boils over. We flip our lids. This can look like a scary, angry reaction, or it might be crying or running away from a problem. Now that we've flipped our lids, See how far away our fingertips are from the midbrain? When our lids are flipped, our upstairs and downstairs brain can't talk to each other. Our emotions have become too strong and we can't think clearly and can't solve the problem in a peaceful way. So what can we do to stop us from flipping our lid? Well, it all starts with realizing that we're about to flip our lid and then turning down the heat so it doesn't happen. Remember that soccer game we talked about at the beginning of the video and you were really upset and didn't get to play? Maybe you felt your tummy rumble or you felt your face getting hot? Did your heart start to pound and did you feel your hands start to clench? Were you frustrated, disappointed, and angry? These types of strong feelings are all indicators that you might be close to flipping your lid. If you feel this start to happen, it's a good idea to walk away, take some deep breaths, and look for an adult to talk to before you flip your lid. It might be a parent, grandparent, coach, teacher, or another trusted adult nearby. They can help you with strategies to solve the problem once you've calmed down enough for your upstairs brain to be ready to do some peaceful problem solving. If you do flip your lid, those same trusted adults can offer you some time and space to cool down before you start to problem solve together. Once your upstairs brain is back in charge, you can share your story and get some help. Using I statements can help you to tell an adult what you need. I need a hug. I need you to listen to what I have to say. I need another chance. I need some alone time. I need a walk. I need you to see that I can do well. Learning more about the brain and how it works can really help us to understand our emotions and to be peaceful problem solvers. When we listen to our bodies and our brains, we can turn the challenges of being a kid into opportunities to learn and grow. Thanks for watching! If you're interested in learning more about the brain and how to manage emotions, some resources are linked in the description box below.
All right. We will drop a link to that if Amy hasn't already to that video because there we go. Because I strongly encourage you to watch that video with your children and talk about it. So let's read this quote here. So this is from The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Daniel Siegel and Dr. Tina Bryson. This is The Whole Brain Child. Some of you may already be familiar with this book. If you haven't, it's one of those game changer books for understanding children, especially in our parenting roles, but also professionally as well. But it's a great guide to understanding the physiology behind our children's and our own emotions and behaviors. And they put it like this when it comes to the upstairs brain. Give the upstairs brain some time. Unlike the primitive downstairs brain, which is intact at birth, the sophisticated upstairs brain is under construction during childhood and adolescence. Plus, it's especially vulnerable to being hijacked by the downstairs brain, especially in high emotion situations. So don't expect your children to make good decisions all the time, we don't make good decisions all the time, or to remain in control of their emotions and actions. Additionally, as our children are growing, their brains are going through periods of intense growth and pruning, like cutting back synapses, the communication routes in the brain. These periods of development are often linked to emotional and behavioral milestones and difficulties in our children that are just, like the 2s and the 3s and all those things. And even that goes on into later years, into childhood. I think we just stop talking about it after we get out of the overwhelmingly obvious toddler stage. So in the early embryonic state to age 2 years, synapse growth is exponential, and during ages 2 to 10, significant pruning happens. So we have the first 2 years, so much growth, and then from 2 to 10, so much pruning, cutting back. Like if anybody grows basil or bushes, you have to cut back a lot of the plant to get like a big, beautiful, bushy plant with a lot of fruit on it. It's kind of the same way in our brains. So during age 2 to 10, when that significant pruning is happening, it's happening really quickly, and about 50% of the extra synapses are eliminated. And in adolescence, pruning continues, but it's just not as quickly. It's not happening as quickly. And they are starting to stabilize. But then another pruning period happens in late adolescence. And then that pruning continues into adulthood. It doesn't stop until your late 20s. And most of this adult pruning is happening in the prefrontal cortex, like the command center of the brain right here. And this is where all of those executive functioning skills are developing. So I don't know if you knew this or not, but your executive functioning skills aren't even fully developed until you're well into your 20s. And we have pretty high expectations on our children, especially our adolescents, to have these fully formed executive functioning skills, right? So we need to give our children time. So here is our pattern of anxiety, okay? So first we have the thing that sets us off. We've got our triggering event. And then we experience that first feeling of fear. And then the amygdala activates our emergency response, like an alarm system, in our downstairs brain. And then all of our defense systems start firing, that epinephrine floods in and our body starts going in and feeling all those physical symptoms that we talked about earlier. And then that can bring out more of the emotional symptoms, which all of that will then cause more fear because yikes, that's a lot going on. And so then that might tip us over the edge to that, what we were talking about in the video, the fight, flight, or freeze. So remember, the alarm system's function is to give energy to our major muscle groups so that we can respond to any perceived threats. And that sounds like a really good thing, right? And it serves us well in survival, as we learned in that video, but the same pattern can be turned on via an interaction at recess, in kitchen, at the dinner table, at a friend's house, and so on. Toddlers are great at living out this pattern in their everyday life over very small triggering events like, a red cup instead of a blue cup at dinner, right? We're all familiar with that. So our brain is prone to create these pathways. It's creating pathways for those messages to travel. And this pathway becomes smoother, a well-traveled road, the more often we get into this pattern, it becomes easier and easier to do so. Our brains just go down that path, nice smooth path. But we can jump into this cycle and we can rewrite the outcome, which we're going to talk about later. There are points where we can enter in this cycle and kind of stop it from going round and round and round. I see we have a hand raised. Amy will address your question there. We are going to go in now for a time of self-check, reflection time. And if people were not able to get the handouts ahead of time, let me just show you what it looks like here. They're questions with little spots to reflect. And then that printout that I showed you. If you did not get these ahead of time or you were unable to print them, don't worry about it. We're going to put all of the questions into the chat box. And I can try to pull up the PDF as well. I think that Zoom just recently changed some of their functions and we're not able to drop it in the chat box like we thought we were going to be able to, but we will overcome, we will persevere. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, so go ahead, Heather. I'm going to unmute you. You have a question. Bear with me. I'm saying ask to unmute, but it's not letting you talk. Where are you, Heather? There we go.
Sorry, my kids are all on Zoom sessions for school, so I'm listening in a very quiet manner, but I have 4 kids, so I'd rather not be chatting just so I don't disrupt their school stuff right now.
Okay. Did you say that you wanted to put it in the chat box or you wanted to ask a question over the microphone?
I don't think I did either. If we can.
Oh, okay. Maybe Maybe that's not what Heather meant to do. That's okay. We're all learning. Okay, so we'll give you time to get in the chat box, Heather, and ask your question if that's what you need to do. But we'll start with the reflection time because I want to give everybody time to actually sit and think with these things. So I am going. Well, let's see. We'll just go through them because I'm not sure that I have it pulled up. Here we go. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see that? Self-check. All right. So I want to give you some time to reflect because we don't often get time in our busy days to just sit down and process our own feelings, write goals, think about what's going well or where we need to make changes. A lot of times it's kind of on the fly, right? And it's usually accompanied by some negative self-talk like, oh, I should be better at that. Oh, I need to do that better. I want to fix that. So let's take some time to process. You're going to start on page 1 of your self-check sheet. And then once you're finished, we're going to go down to the talk it out page, but we're not going to do the whole talk it out page. We're just going to do part of it. So I'll read out and Amy will put in the chat box the questions. And if you have a piece of paper and a pen, this is a great time to give yourself time to process. So the first question on this sheet is, how do I react to stress? The second question is, how do I approach new and unknown things in my life? And this can be internally and externally. Think about how you're processing internally, but then how you might be presenting to your family, to your children. What do I want my home to feel like? What are some descriptor words? And what are my family's core values? What mottos do we live by? Okay, I'll give you guys some time to go through those questions. You've had time to go through that first page, just go ahead and drop that I'm done in the chat box, and then we'll move on to the second page. Okay. Let's go ahead and I'll read now over the talk it out page. We're going to skip over the second self-check page and we're going to go down to talk it out. And we're just going to look at the first box and the third box. Write a sentence of how worry and anxiety is impacting your life right now. and write a sentence of how worry or anxiety is impacting your child right now. Whoops, let's get that back up on the screen. Okay. So for an example might be if you're having a hard time thinking of an example, and if you could want to start with your child because their worries come to mind before yours, that's fine. But an example might be, my fear of heights is stopping me from having fun with my kids at an amusement park. That might be an example that you have. Again, just go ahead. All right. Turn off our thinking music. Okay, so I hope that that was helpful. And if you didn't get to wrap up your thoughts, please go back and spend some time on this later today. Let's see. Someone had a question here, externalizing the worry. That's next. We're not there yet. So you're a step ahead. I just wanted you to look at, someone asked, can you elaborate on externalizing the worry? And we are going to talk about that. So get ready. All right, so we're gonna do another little interactive thing. We're gonna do the same thing, same number, same everything. So once I activate it, you should be able to just start texting again, but we're gonna take a quick little poll about how we parent. So we're gonna go over some descriptor words that describe how we parent. So let's activate that, get it all up. So just put in some words that describe your parenting style. We'll wait for some of those to roll in. Patient, controlling, another patient, supportive, honest, authoritarian, connected, gentle, nurture. We've got a good mix of words in here, things that might be strengths or weaknesses in how we parent. We all have them. Connected, permissive, guidance, consistent. I like that. Oh, talk it out. Reactive. Yeah, I think a lot of us have just been kind of reacting lately, right? Not much time to prepare for something that we don't understand. Responsive. That's great. Awesome. Thank you for participating in that. Okay. So we're going to talk about some parenting styles because they are relevant to how we respond to anxiety in our children. So Diana Baumrind, hope I said that right, was a clinical and developmental psychologist known for her research on parenting styles in the 1960s. So I already saw some of the words in there that we're going to talk about today. So let's start with authoritarian. It's in the second box on the top. Authoritarian is thought of as the disciplinarian. It's often strict, there's little room for negotiation, and punishment is often used. Communication is usually one way, and the rules are not explained. Why do I have to do this, Mom? Because I said so. My way or the highway. Authoritarian parenting expects that blind obedience. There's high expectations, and there's limited flexibility. And I just realized that I disappeared on you, that I stopped sharing my video, so I'll come back. Okay, and the next one is permissive. So permissive is when, oh, we have a question. Hold on, let's see what our question. If you would like, Jennifer, you can just drop your question in the chat box, or we can try to unmute you again, and we'll see how that goes. Oh, there you are. Okay. I think you can unmute yourself at this point. Let's try it. Oh, no question. Okay. All right, so moving on. We have the permissive parent. So permissive parenting, they're seen as indulgent to their children's desires. They offer limited guidance and direction. Permissive parents often trying to be their friend first, not their parent. There are limited or no rules, and they often let children figure out things on their own. Communication is open, and they usually let the child decide things for themselves rather than telling them. Permissive parents are often seen as warm and nurturing, and expectations are limited or they're just never set. Another parenting style that she talks about is neglectful. So here there's lots of freedom. These parents tend to stay out of their child's way. And sometimes this is a choice. Sometimes it's a conscious choice, and sometimes it just stems from a lack of interest in parenting or not knowing what to do, an indifference. No particular discipline style is used, and children are often left to their own devices without caring or information from parents. Communication is limited, and they're seen as lacking nurturing or interest in their children. And then the last one up at the top, the authoritative. This parenting style is described as being reasonable, nurturing. There are high and clear expectations that are set. And these children of authoritative parents tend to be self-disciplined. They can think for themselves. And after being given firm boundaries with love and with care and with explanation, so they know why the rules are there. And that gives them autonomy. The rules are clear, they're firm, and they're explained. And authoritative parents are seen as nurturing and loving. And goals are set often with the input of the child. These parents value independence in their children. So think about how these parenting styles may play into helping or harming a child who's dealing with anxiety. And then here's another graphic that includes some more modern terms in here that you may be more familiar with. It comes from thebump.com, like Tiger Mom, that was the book that was released several years ago, attachment parenting, positive parenting, outsource, and then helicopter. And I think one that's not on there that's important to note is also bulldozer parent. So helicopter parent intervenes and rescues, right, to prevent failures. Bulldozer parenting will pave the way, a nice smooth path for their child so that they don't have to feel uncomfortable or come across anything difficult. So think about what parenting style you fit into and how this may have changed as a result of COVID-19. We're spending a lot more time at home with our children. Is anyone else jumping in more frequently to help solve their problems just to maintain some peace in your home? I definitely have been. But what we know about that is that it's important to let our kids struggle. Okay, so this poll, we're not going to leave anywhere. It's just going to be right in. It's going to pop up and it's going to be, what is your parenting style? You can pick a few of them: authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, or neglectful. So how would you categorize yourself? You can pick more than one. You know, if you're like, oh, well, I'm this one and I'm this one, that's okay. You don't have to choose. And we'll see. I'll let that roll in for another 10 seconds, and then we'll share and see what kind of parents we have in our audience here. And again, it's anonymous. All right. Oh, still got some trickling in. Okay, I'm gonna share the results with y'all. Okay, so it looks like authoritative is 82% of us. Authoritative and authoritarian, and then authoritarian and permissive are really close, and then a handful of neglectful. So we've got kind of the whole gamut here in the audience. Okay. My computer, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about anxiety enhancing patterns that we participate in as parents. So these messages that we're going to talk about, reassurance, accommodation, pushing too hard, modeling and allowance, these messages continue to put anxiety at the center. It continues to, the anxiety continues to control the child and remain in charge, and it continues to feed the anxiety monster. And some of these things may have really good intentions behind them, all the love that we have for our children behind them, but they still may be contributing to anxiety enhancing patterns. So the first one we'll talk about is reassurance. So this comes from a place of love and care. We can provide constant reassurance that our child is okay and able to handle it. So you may have heard yourself saying, you're fine, you can do this, I'm right here, don't worry. When we do all of the external talking for our child, then they don't learn how to develop their own internal dialogue. They don't experiment and learn new skills. We may also provide them with more details than they will ever need to prepare them for something new or scary coming up. I'm so guilty of this, especially with my daughter, first-time parent. I remember the first time that she was old enough to kind of understand what a shot was going to be at the doctor's office. I walked her through, before we got there, that doctor's appointment with every detail that she could possibly imagine so that she knew what was coming as an attempt to prepare her and not scare her, right? Coming from love and care. We also, it's an example of that up top on the slide. We're going to your grandparents at 10 o'clock. We'll be there for 3 hours. There'll be 2 dogs there. Like, imagine your child's afraid of dogs. They may be inside when we arrive, the dogs, and then are outside on leashes when we get there. And there's a 40% chance of thunderstorms, right? We're giving our child every little piece of information to set them up so that they have it all. We see this a lot we do this a lot with our students on the autism spectrum too. We warn them about everything. We tell them where we're going, what time we'll be there, who will be there, exactly what to expect, and so on. But this may only create more rigidity in our children, an inability to handle the new, and a dependence on us to set them up. This does not make the anxiety go away. It only shows them that as long as we are there to warn them, that they will be safer. So those messages of you're fine, the interpretation can be, my feelings aren't important, or I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere, I love you. The interpreted message of the child may be, I can't handle this on my own. The oversharing of details, the interpretation will be, I need someone else to give me all the information before I will be okay. The second area we're going to talk about is accommodation. So this is when parents go through great lengths to make sure that the child feels as comfortable as possible. I mentioned that bulldozer parenting. I think some of that might fit into this too. This may include helicopter parenting, rescuing them from frightening situations, or helping or allowing them to avoid their fears. So the messages that we might be sending when we're accommodating are, I'll come pick you up right away, or Grandpa will lock up the dogs whenever we go over, or you don't have to play soccer anymore. Of course you can stay home from school. We won't go there or do that ever again. The translation of these messages will be, I should always feel comfortable. I don't have to do anything I don't want to, and someone else will come to my rescue because I cannot take care of myself. I cannot handle it myself. The next area, pushing too hard. Some of you may have been thinking during the reassurance and the accommodation, well, are we just going to be pushing them too much? Well, pushing too hard isn't good either. So this is the equivalent of throwing your child into the deep end of the pool before they've learned how to swim. We want them to experience fear and the uncomfortable so that they learn how to manage it, but after we've given them tools and support. So this may, if we throw them off into the deep end, this may only serve to create more anxiety, damage the trust in the relationship, or create a traumatizing event for your child, which is the last thing we want to do. So some of these pushing too hard messages might be, suck it up, buttercup, or you're doing this whether you like it or not, stop crying, don't be such a baby, or think back to those family mottos like Joneses don't cry. You know, that might be one of those messages. I did it, or your little brother did this, so you can do it too. The translation of this to our children, maybe I have no safety net, literally. I do not have autonomy. My feelings do not matter, once again, and I'm not as good as my little brother is. And that is a whole different training on sibling relationships and how we don't want to set our children up to be rivals with each other. And then the last one that we're going to talk about here is modeling and allowing. So this is when anxiety rules the home. Everybody is, getting in line with whatever anxieties your children have, and we're just all following right along. The modeling of this might look like you as a parent verbalizing the worst case scenario, like don't sit like that, don't sit on the chair like that, you could fall and crack your head open. How often are we jumping to those worst case scenarios when we want our children to stop doing something? And I'm guilty of that as well. How do you handle new or scary situations in front of your children? Another example of allowing it is that anxiety just runs in the family. They've always been this way since they were a baby. They're just a worrier. My mother's anxious. I'm anxious. My kid is anxious. We're just going to allow it to continue to have control. And then allowing the tantrums or bad behavior because it stems from anxiety. So this may look like your child talking back, being disrespectful when they're in or anticipate a stressful situation that brings them anxiety, and you know this because you know your child so well. So then when that happens, we may explain away their behavior because we know that it's coming from a place of worry. But instead, we can actively listen to them with our body language, reflecting back their feelings, supporting them, empathizing with them, and then setting a boundary. So Janet Lansbury, she's also she's a developmental children's book author. She's written several books on respectful parenting. I love how simply she words things. For example, if your child's throwing a fit or talking to you disrespectfully, you could say, I understand that this is hard for you and I'm here to help you, but I will not let you talk to me that way, right? You're there first, you're supporting first, you're empathizing first, but then you're still keeping that clear boundary and not allowing anxiety to rule the home. Okay, so let's do another quick poll here. I'm gonna pop up on your screen, little moment of truth. Okay, so which anxiety enhancing patterns have you engaged in? And you can select more than one, but really try to hone in on what you do the most or what you see has the biggest impact on your child. I'm gonna let that roll in for a little bit and see what we got. Let a few more people. All right, I think that's all we're gonna get. Okay, let's share the results. We have a lot of reassurance. I had a feeling because it's coming from such a place of love and care, right? Accommodating and pushing too hard. Yep. And then we model it ourselves or just allow it to happen. Yeah, pretty good, pretty even mix of the other three after reassurance. Okay. Thank you for being honest with me. Okay, so let's talk about what all of those things have in common. So what they all have in common is that it results in poor problem solving skills in our children if we engage in all of those anxiety enhancing patterns. So for example, with reassurance and accommodation, right? We talked about they become dependent on you for their inner dialogue, or for us to set the stage with all the warnings and the information. Or when we change their environment around for them so that they don't have to feel uncomfortable, they don't get the opportunity to practice problem solving skills. And the safest place to practice problem solving skills is when you're still a kid and you've got that safety net to land on, rather than encountering and dealing with these problems for the first time as adults, right? The other thing that they all have in common is a loss of autonomy in our children. By doing things for them, helping them avoid things that make them uncomfortable, or allowing anxiety to rule the home, or pushing them into the deep end, they lose their sense of autonomy. Our children do not get a chance, again, to practice the physical, sometimes literally physical or executive functioning skills that they need. And we can sometimes believe that we're loving our children by doing it all for them, but in reality, practically, the younger that you can let your child do things like get dressed, make themselves a sandwich, clear their plate at the table alone, the more independent, happy, and successful children they'll be and adults that they'll grow into be. And the same applies for the same concepts apply for dealing with difficult feelings that come up. And of course, the big one at the end with the sad face is that anxiety is still in charge. When we reassure or dismiss our children's worries, it does not stop that biological response, right? Their bodies are still gonna send them those messages. It's not gonna stop the biological response the next time the situation rolls around, or if anxiety takes on a different face, because like we talked about, their fears will change with age. We can change the environment all we like, but the anxiety will still be there. And we can push them into the pool, and it's definitely still gonna be there. It's not going away. Okay, so remember this from earlier, remember the Flip the Lid video, and we are gonna have a break in just a minute for anybody who's itching to get up like me. Remember in the Flip Your Lid video, we learned how anxiety is essential to our survival, but then that cycle can get set off over and over again in places and situations when it's not needed. And it does this because it's trying to protect us, but we don't need to be protected. Well, our children need to know that information. There's a reason why that video was created for kids. The kids need to know how it works because knowledge is power. It helps take away the mystery of anxiety. It stops anxiety from being the boogeyman. We've already gone over some messages that enhance this cycle, and you may have already picked up on some changes that you can make to your language and dealing with your child to stop the cycle, but we're going to continue to learn places where we can jump in. So we must recognize and teach anxiety's role to our children. It's natural to feel fear and to be uncomfortable. It's necessary to grow and to have new experiences. We need to expect worry to show up in new and uncomfortable situations so it stops surprising us. Like when my kids fall down and immediately go from nothing to a level 10 crying situation, I try, not always, but I try to come in and calmly ask, are you surprised or are you hurt? Because oftentimes it's not the pain from the bump that's causing them to cry. It's that it surprised them. It caught them off guard. And it's the same thing with anxiety. We need to expect it to show up. So right now, I'm going to allow you some time to put in the Q&A some questions that I'll review, and then we can go over them at the end. And we're going to just take a quick little break. It's 10 after the hour according to my watch. So let's come back at 15 past the hour. And just everybody take a break, grab a cozy drink, stretch, and we will be back to finish up. And I will let you know, we are more than 50% of the way done. The second half after the break is faster. So. Okay. Back in, come back from your break. Get back into it. Those of you that ask some questions, I'm going to save them for the end, and I'll go through them and kind of pick out a few that stood out. And together at the end, you may have some of your questions answered as the presentation continues. So we did get a few questions, and we will get to them at the end. So let's keep going. Everybody ready? Stretched? Okay. So when we give our children words to describe what they're feeling and the biological reasons for why they feel this way, it helps to normalize it, and it takes away the mystery, right? We're talking about that. It helps remove a level of the fear right off the bat. If they know that this isn't some scary boogeyman feeling inside of them, knowing this is how your body works, this is how your brain works, that right there is a really great starting point to take away a level of fear. And now you have some tools and some language of your own to start that conversation, right? That's why those self-checks are so important. Being uncomfortable, fearing the unknown, having doubts is all part of being human. But we have the power to tell the worries when to leave us alone. We get to teach them, we get to teach our children and ourselves when to ignore those normal and expected worry thoughts so that we can move on, and when to pay attention and listen to them, because anxiety serves a purpose, right? And sometimes we do need to listen when it's trying to warn us of danger. So we need to help our children learn and ourselves learn how to filter out the messages of when it's protecting us and when it's actually harming us from doing something that will bring growth. Okay, so some recommended reading for y'all, and Amy will drop this in the chat. And I forgot to mention, it doesn't have to do with this book that I'm going to recommend, but forgot to mention it earlier that we do have some door prizes. I totally forgot to mention that, but we are going to do a raffle for the attendees after you do the survey at the end for a great book about worry and anxiety. Okay, so we'll get back to that later, but some recommended reading, and I think it's backwards in the video, but this is called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, and it's by Reed Wilson and Lynn Lyons. And they talk about externalizing the anxiety. And so we read this at Psych Services, we read this book, it's a book club. The professionals at Psych Services every month or two, we pick a book that is relevant to our profession and we read it, and then we talk about it together and then how we can apply it to what we do. So that book was a game changer, and I highly, highly recommend it to everyone, even if you don't have kids, even if you're not a parent. I think that it's a really great book, and so that there are some principles from that have been included and embedded in here as well, and into the presentation. So one thing that they talk about is externalizing the anxiety. So externalization helps take the anxiety and worry and put it outside of yourself, which allows you to see it from a different perspective. It starts to take the power away from the hold that anxiety has on your thoughts, your body, and your decision making. So think about all of the information that we get every day as parents. What new articles, this is the thing that you did 10 years ago is now harming your children, or Facebook posts, or well-meaning relatives and friends who are just overflowing with advice on how to raise children. You hopefully have learned how to filter out those messages and when to just, politely smile and nod at Aunt Karen when she tells you again what she thinks you should do about your child's eating habits. Because those are all external messages, and it's easier to just take what you need and then move on. And with our children, especially our younger children, it can be helpful to personify anxiety when we externalize it, to personify it, to give it a name. In our house, my house, it's called the worry bug. That's what we use. And you can come up with your own name or visual representation that makes sense with your child. Might be an animal or a mythical creature, and you can take some time kind of describing what this anxiety might look like. 3 horns, or maybe it's teeny tiny, small and fuzzy. Whatever is going to get that conversation starting with your child to externalize and personify that worry. Older children may just respond to calling it worry, right? They might be too cool for the worry bug, even though they're totally not. No one's too cool for the worry bug. But older children may just respond to it better by calling it worry. So we're going to teach your child and your entire family. Remember at the beginning, the family-focused counseling that was the most effective. We're going to teach our entire family how to talk to the anxiety and how to have a relationship with it, because it's no longer the scary force that your child is experiencing all alone. It's the worry bug, and it impacts everyone. We're going to teach our child how to hear when it's the anxiety talking, and we're going to do that through modeling, right? We're going to teach that through pointing it out to them. Oh, that sounds like the worry bug talking right now. By teaching them to recognize when it's the worry bug talking, when it's their anxiety talking, we're also teaching them to expect it to show up, right? Oh, here you are, worry. You usually turn up when I'm getting ready for an audition. You don't scare me. We want to take it seriously, and we want to make it memorable with our kids. And then we also want to model ourselves how we talk to our own worries, because as we've learned, we have an impact. We have a role on our children's mental health. But when we model our own worries, we want to make sure that we are not sharing adult-only worries. So Reed Wilson and Lynn Lyons, from the book that I just shared with you, Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, they give this example. An example of good modeling would be, my worry wart kept bugging me about being late for my dentist appointment. Okay, that's kid appropriate, right? An example of bad modeling would be, my worry wart kept asking me if grandma was going to survive her heart surgery. That's a bigger worry that you can share with another adult, but our children are not big enough to carry those adult-size worries. We don't want to give them that burden. Okay, so also in the handout, which if you didn't get it ahead of time, we are going to send it out in an email afterwards, so it should be in there, but we have a handout about, I don't have it printed off to show you, but about teaching our kids how to talk to worry, and it's just some little blurbs and some little reminders of how we can phrase things to our kids when we're talking about it. So let's go through some of the ones that are on the slide here. So the first way that we can teach our kids how to talk to worry is we teach them to expect it. So we can say to their worry, I know you're just trying to help. We're teaching our kids to say these things to themselves, right? We don't want to be the external message. We want to teach them how to become those message givers. I know you're just trying to help. You usually show up at these times, so I'm not surprised by you. Worry is a part of learning something new, and I'm supposed to feel this way. We can teach them to take care of their worry. I'm going to feel nervous, and then it'll be over. Or it's okay, things will work out. Or we tell our kids, you're okay, I'm here. It'll all work out. Let's teach them to give that message to themselves. It's okay, I can handle whatever happens. I'm safe even though I feel scared. And then we can also teach them how to boss it around, which I personally think is the most fun. So listen up, worry bug. You are going to ruin my fun if I listen to you right now. I know that swimming in the pool makes me feel nervous, but I have floaties and there are grown-ups all around me and I'm safe. So I just want to have fun with my friends. Please go away. Another way we can boss it around. I'm going to get back to you on that worry. And again, if we're sharing with our children how to recognize those signs and biological signs and symptoms of anxiety when it shows up, then we can teach them how to say these messages to that feeling. You're not helping, I'm going to ignore you. I know you're there, but I'm busy. And, or I feel like with little kids, they like to boss it around even more, knock it off, stop trying to scare me, go with your child's energy, whatever Whatever they're leaning into, lean into it with them. You're ruining my fun. I've had it with you. Let them get angry at it. That ability to redirect their anger at their anxiety instead of feeling those feelings inside might give them back some of that power that they feel like they've been missing. And they may feel silly doing this at first, just like with any skill, it takes practice. You may also feel silly doing this at first, but they'll also be more likely to be on board with this if the whole family is practicing this together, because no one wants to be thought of as the problem. So let's work through our problems as a unit, as a family. So this is helping us train our brain. Remember when we talked about how knowledge is power and how our brains like to travel down those well-traveled, smooth roads? Well, our brains are also incredibly malleable and capable of creating new roads and new connections. We can train our amygdala over time to stop firing in certain scenarios that previously triggered anxiety. And in order to do that, we need to teach our children and ourselves to step towards things that scare us or make us feel uncomfortable. And just like with any new skill, it takes practice, exposure, and feedback. We can't learn how to cook a meal simply by reading a beautiful cookbook. We need to get our hands messy, make mistakes, taste it, evaluate it, and accept feedback, whether that's good or bad feedback. And the same is true for our children and facing their fears. The more often that they learn how to recognize the signs that their body is giving them, name it as the worry bug, as their anxiety, and talk to it, and then they're going to be able to take that next step so much easier. The more our children can accept worry as normal, expect it, and face it anyway, then those new paths will continue to be created. We're going to go around that well-traveled road of jumping into the fight or flight, the flipping the lid. We're going to create a new path. That downstairs brain, right? The downstairs brain is going to continue to try to take over. It's going to continue to signal all those alarms and send those biological feelings. But now your child can say, okay, worry, I know that you're just doing your job and trying to protect me from something, but I'm fine right now. I can handle this. And the more that they do that, the body will begin to talk back and will understand those new messages that they're sending their brain. This is teaching our children how to keep their upstairs brain and their downstairs brain in communication with each other, even when that fear is there. That's where that talking to, the teaching them to have a relationship with that anxiety is so important for keeping the upstairs and the downstairs brain in constant communication. Again, no one is advocating for sending your child into a situation without tools. The talking, like we've been doing here, the new language we've been talking about, the coaching, the teaching them the tools consistently while also guiding them towards things that scare them is very, very different than throwing them into the deep end when they can't swim. So remember, it's not just about what your child is afraid of. It's about addressing the feelings of anxiety, no matter what the context is. Because as children grow and go through new developmental periods, the source of their anxiety may change from monsters under the bed to water to driving. So we want to teach our children how to get familiar with anxiety as a feeling so that they can handle every new fear and uncomfortable situation that comes their way. So if we can teach our children that our body is just responding to our brains, then we can help decrease the scariness. So these tools on your screen, these are regulation techniques that are simple ways for your child to get in touch with their body and gently release tension from their muscles and their mind. And these are tools to teach your children when they're calm, when there's a very firm lid in place. This is not the time when they're already kind of past the point in the circle and they're like halfway around that circle. We're kind of too late at that point. These are things that we can introduce earlier on, closer to those triggering events, so that it doesn't continue to escalate. So under meditation, we all aim to meditate every single day when we wake up for 30 minutes to an hour. I think that's the dream, right? But there are some small ways that we can incorporate this meditation into our lives and our kids' lives. YouTube has a wealth of information. There are guided meditations on there for adults and children. One that we love in our house is Cosmic Kids Yoga. She has great adventure yoga stories with, you know, characters from Disney princesses to Pokemon. It's really interactive for kids. And she also has started including some mindfulness and meditation techniques and practices. So that's Cosmic Kids Yoga. There's also the Calm app and the Headspace app, which are pretty similar, and they have some guided meditations in there for kids and adults. The ones for kids are very short, you know, they're like 2 or 3 minutes. And those are awesome resources and tools. If you are an educator, if you have a school address, you can sign up on the Calm app for a lifetime membership for free. It is an incredible app. We use it daily in my home. Another way that we can incorporate these things is teaching our children how to visualize. So this is something that we might want to practice on our own first, but our children have really strong imaginations, right? So let's use them. So instead of how I was talking about with my daughter, with telling her every single detail about going to the doctor's office and me walking her through all those steps, instead we want to kind of walk through that again, but at our child at the center and with our child envisioning what they're doing and where they're going, and kind of show, like, having it be from their mind that they're imagining it rather than us setting the stage for them, if that makes sense. And there are some great tools if you want to dig deeper into that. You can just look up visualization, how to incorporate visualization. Some quick tips. 5-finger breathing. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's a really easy tool because you always have your hands. So this is another one of those things that right after a triggering event, when you start to see your child's alarm systems go off, before we're full blown reacting, we might teach them this tool at, you know, again, when the lid is firm. So maybe we're doing this at the dinner table, but 5-finger breathing, it's where you breathe in and out as you trace along your fingers. So in through your nose, down, out through your mouth and up. So those are things that you can model yourself when you're feeling stressed. You can practice with your child when they're calm, and then you can try to introduce it when they're escalated. The more you practice it, the more receptive they will be to it when escalated, but it's not going to be like a magic trick that's just going to happen right away. Sometimes kids will be like, I don't want any tools because I'm mad. And at that point, we're probably too late. If a kid is refusing to use any pre-taught tools, then they're further in that cycle, in the circle than we thought they were. Another good thing to practice is belly breathing. So that's, again, getting connected to the body, hands on the belly, breathing deeply so that you're filling your belly up like a balloon, and then emptying the balloon. Some quick muscle relaxation things that you can do no matter where you are is teaching your kid how to squeeze lemons. So pretend that tell your kid, you know, pretend you have 2 lemons in your hand and you're trying to squeeze all the juice out as much as you can, as much as you can. This is really great with kids who are angry. And they squeeze it, and maybe you count to 10, and then you relax and you shake it out. And a similar one with facial muscles is pretending that you have a fly on the nose and you're trying to scrunch up your entire face and try to get your face really still so that the fly doesn't move off your nose, or you're trying to look on your nose to see them. And then you count to 10 and you release it, and all those facial muscles relax. This is kind of, again, getting the kid back into their body when they're starting to spiral. And then the last one is turtle in the shell. So that's, you know, bring your your shoulders up, tuck your head into your turtle shell and count to 10, and then release and roll it out and shake it out. Okay. So how do we get our child to buy in? Right? Sometimes children will say that they don't have an interest in something. They start, you know, I don't care about that birthday party. I don't like soccer anyway. You know, I don't care about school. They're using these I don't cares as emotional defenses. So how do you get a kid to buy in when they're telling you that they don't care? So one way that you can do this is by playing the what if game. With your kid, with your family, where you're having these conversations, you know, when everyone's calm, when you're driving in the car. Hey, if worry wasn't in your way and you could do anything, what would it be? And maybe come up with some family what if goals, you know. If mom wasn't so scared of heights, then we could go camp on the edge of the Grand Canyon. If this worry wasn't in our way, this is what we could do. Be a part of that conversation, and, you know, just play the what if games. What if no one was going to be at soccer practice today when you tried out? What would happen? we can turn their have tos into want tos, and this is that growth mindset talk, right? I can't do that. Well, yet, adding the yet. No, you can't do that yet, but you're learning, you're growing, you're changing every day. So an example of turning a have to into a want to, I have to try out for the team in front of everyone to play soccer. How can we help our child reword that statement? Well, let's put that have into a want. How about it's, I want to try out for the soccer team so that I can play soccer. And then remind them of their past successes, moments when they were brave and strong. Like remember when you were scared to ride that roller coaster and you almost got out of line, but then you told your worry that you could handle it and that you knew that you were safe and you just wanted to have fun. You got back in and you did it, and that was your favorite moment of the day. Reminding your kids of their past successes, whatever they may be, will help them feel more confident to eventually buy in. And again, it may not happen right away. It may not be like a magic shift, but again, what we've learned about the brain, the more we travel down the road, the smoother the road gets, right? Okay, so we're gonna do another self-check. We're gonna do self-check, page 2. If you have your handout, it starts with what crutches are we giving our children? So those 4 boxes that we have here on the screen, those are if you don't have the handout in front of you, those are the 4 questions that are on the second self-check page. So I'm going to give you some time to do that. And then once we do that, we're going to go back to the talk it out page. So someone mentioned the externalizing your worries. We're going to get back to the second half of that sheet. So just stay on the self-check sheet for now, okay? So just do these 4 questions, and I'll give you some time to reflect. So we are going to take a look at your worry statements on the Talk It Out handout. And using what you know now, I want you to rewrite those statements into can statements or write them in a way that includes worries. So look at those worry sentences. That example that I shared earlier today was, my fear of heights is stopping me from having fun with with my kids at the amusement park. A way that I might rewrite that sentence is, hey worry, talking to my worry, hey worry, I know you think I'm in grave danger when I go on these rides and you like to show up and keep me from having fun with my family. I know you'll be there, but I am going to ignore and trust that I am safe so that I can be present with my kids. Okay, so take a look at those barriers, see how you can reword into want to statements, see if there are any action steps that could be taken there, and how you can model tackling something new to your children. Back on the last self-check that we just did, what would I do if anxiety or worry was not holding me back? How can you turn that into an action step? And if anyone wants to share their original and their rewrites on the Talk It Outs, feel free to put them in the chat box or send them to Amy privately so that she can put them into the chat box anonymously for you. And if anyone is feeling particularly brave, we can try the raise a hand and unmute again. And you can go ahead and ask to be unmuted and you can read it out to the group. So feel free if you would like to drop those rewrites into the chat and I'll give you a couple minutes to focus on that. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for people. And again, if you felt a little rushed, I encourage you to go back and look at this later. I didn't see anything pop up in the chat for sharing their rewrites, but if you would like to, feel free to still go ahead and do that and we can come back around to it. Let's see, how are we doing on time? All right, so let's keep going here. Okay, so at Psych Services, that's our focus, is the school and home connection, right? We are educational psychologists and behavior analysts who are working to build that bridge with families and schools. And so we want to make sure that, well, our kids are typically spending a lot of time at school. Obviously, things are different now, but having that school and home connection is so important. And you may see a lot of anxiety at home that teachers just do not see at school or vice versa. But it's always important to have good communication to build that homeschool connection. You can talk to your classroom teacher, your school counselor, school social worker, school psychologist. Usually the classroom teacher is the first line of defense when you're just talking about hey, I want to share this information with you. Johnny's been dealing with a lot of anxiety lately. Some good questions that you might ask the teacher, especially if there's a difference of anxiety at home versus at school, or, well, what are you seeing? What are you seeing at school? What seems to help my child in the classroom? And then you can share whatever language and tools that you're using at home to try to keep things as consistent as possible. Like, if you hear Johnny talking about the worry bug, this is what it is. This is how we're talking about his anxiety in our family right now. And one thing that's important to remember is that anxiety may look different across school and home because the expectations are different, the structure is completely different, and the triggers are completely different. And now we have the fun new task where our our home triggers are like enmeshed with our school triggers. So we may be seeing new things that we've never seen before from our children. I think I saw, just want to make sure that, okay, great. I'm going to read this out. Someone here shared their worry sentence, which is, I'm worried that my high school senior will not graduate from high school this June because they have multiple Fs right now. Okay, so that's a sample worry sentence. And I'll ask this panelist, were you able to come up with a rewrite for that? Wait another minute for it to come in. I'll check back in a second. Still struggling with the rewrite. Okay, so, well, maybe we can help with that. So I'm worried that my high school student will not graduate. So again, the worries are focused on your child and how they're doing in school. So how can we rewrite that into talking to worry? I mean, these are really real concerns. Yeah, any group ideas? Anybody else want to jump in with something that they've learned of how to add in talking to that worry, taking it outside of yourself, and looking at any barriers? Anybody else want to chime in? A minute. Okay. It's always harder to rewrite when it's not your own. So, and let's see, let's work through this together. So, hey, worry, I know that you're here because you're trying to keep me safe, right? Those feelings are coming up, but ultimately, my child is safe and I have the skills that I need to support my child through this difficult time. I can still be a loving and supportive parent. Again, it's not solving the problem. The problem's not going to go away. We're just talking about what are we doing with that feeling. It's trying to take away the burden and the hold that the feeling has on us of a very real problem, but then trying to relinquish some of that power. Here's a sample rewrite. Hey, worry, I know that you're here because you're trying to keep me safe. Oh, geez, thank you, Amy. You just kind of rewrote what I said
I
there.
just tried to transcribe what you wrote or what you said.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for sharing that. All right, so we're going to start to wrap it up here. There were a couple questions that came up in the Q&A. I think some of them I already addressed through the rest of the training, but I'm going to circle back and check and just make sure. But when to seek additional help, we talked about this at the beginning. When your child or teenager has persistent worries, or yourself, persistent worries or intrusive thoughts, can't focus, can't think on anything else, extreme clinging, avoidance, or repetitive behaviors that interfere with school performance, friendships, or family life. Does your child have palpitations, chest pains, abdominal pain, vomiting, shortness of breath, sleeping problems for which no physical cause can be found? Those are back to those physical symptoms. Does your child worry or ask for reassurance almost every single day? Does your child consistently avoid certain age-appropriate situations or activities, or avoid doing them without a parent? Again, those physical symptoms. And does your child have any daily repetitive rituals that seem to be in place to calm or ease worry? That's when you want to reach out to a professional to get additional help. Trainings like this are great, but they're no substitution for therapy. Effective treatment is a cognitive behavioral therapy, individual and family therapy, medication, or a combination of those things. Those are the most effective forms of treatment. As always, make the best choices that work for your family with the input of your doctor. Okay, and then here, this is also included in the handout. It should be kind of, when we're talking about that school part, the different levels of support that your child can receive through the schools. When we're talking about level of severity, frequency of anxiety, if we're talking about kind of beyond just the normal day-to-day life worries, this is kind of broken down for you of what that looks like. And that should be in the handout that you'll get again in an email after this. So again, courage is not the absence of fear, but doing something in spite of fear. So let's circle back to questions. Again, if somebody needed a certificate of completion for this, we will, I think, Amy, jump in if I'm wrong, but we'll be sending those out automatically to anybody who listed themselves as a school psych. And then if anybody else, we don't know what the requirements are for all the different boards for educators or other mental health professionals, but we can provide you with the certificate of completion, and you can see if you can get some continuing education credits for that. And so going back to some questions that came in earlier, let me just go back. Right, okay, so someone asked earlier on, when a child is triggered and they feel their body panicking, elevated heart rate, tears, how do you handle it? Telling them it's okay and that they have control to calm down doesn't seem to work. And I think that we talked a little bit about that, where trying to figure out those triggers and jumping in sooner. Sometimes when a child is well into that pattern, you're kind of past the point of no return. You just kind of have to ride it out with them. And the best thing that you can do in that moment when they're in the point of no return is just model it yourself. And just continuing to be that like calm, steady presence next to them while everything inside of them feels control. You're kind of like that anchor on the outside. And if they can't breathe, then you breathe, and you just continue to model it and be there with them until they can start to like come down and regain some control. Another question that came in was, how do you begin to teach autonomy if you see a pattern like reassurance or accommodation has led to your lack of this ability? That's a great question. How can we teach autonomy when we already see a pattern? So I think how I would answer that is I would recommend starting with small wins, small successes, even things that have nothing to do with the pattern that you're talking about. Anytime that we can instill a sense of success, completion, autonomy in our children is just going to continue to create those roadways in the brain, connecting all of those messages. So it could be as simple as, starting with something really small that you know your child is capable of, and that is really motivating to your child to like start as simple and small as possible, and then start to get bigger and bigger. So if picking their toys up off the floor isn't particularly motivating to them, but getting to scrape all their food in the trash is, start there. Okay, so, and I think that the other question that came up was already addressed, and yeah. So as Amy mentioned in the chat, if anybody else has any lingering questions, just drop them in the chat. And we are going to send out a survey before this thing times out. And remember, if you complete the survey, you'll be entered in a raffle for, I don't remember, Amy. It was a book.
No worries. It's the Worry Workbook for kids. It's a really cool resource, and it's appropriate for all ages.
Okay, great. And is that survey already in the chat for them to click on?
Yes, I have put it in. It says, please complete our brief survey to be entered for a raffle prize.
Okay, perfect. So if everyone sees that in the chat, make sure you click on that link now and just have it open in your computer or your phone, because it will disappear when the webinar ends. We might be able to include it in the email maybe, but it would be better to click on it now.
No, we can't. It's only for today, so you have to complete the survey today. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we did it. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you feel like you left today with maybe some insight into some patterns that you had in your home and some ways to kind of create some new patterns. And I hope that you were able to kind of pick one thing and use those times, those self-reflection sheets to kind of pinpoint some spots and use some new language and some new tools to address anxiety in your home. And we really appreciate having you here. And yeah, we hope to see you at any future webinars. I know Psyched has several more coming up through the month of November, and they are all free. So go back and check them out. And yeah,